and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be continuing with my college football game-by-game prediction and roster discussion videos. Today I'll be doing the LSU Tigers. Head coach Brian Kelly had a great recruiting class in 2025. It ranked ninth in the country. It had 2 5-star players and 13 4-star players. And LSU returns at 62% of their production, which ranks at 38th in the country. And LSU's roster is loaded. I don't see any weaknesses on this team. And Brian Kelly, I think this will be his 35th season as a college football head coach, and this will be the best roster that he's ever had to work with, not just in his time at LSU, but his whole time as a head coach. The roster's so loaded that I think if he doesn't get LSU to the college football playoff this year, it could cost him his job. If LSU goes 8-4 again, I'm pretty sure Brian Kelly will be fired. And if they go 9-3, I think there's a good chance he'll be fired. Starting on the offensive side of the ball, they weren't very good here overall last year. They averaged only 27 points per game. They were really good at passing, but they were bad overall at running. I think the points per game average will go up this year, and so will the rushing yards per game. And I still think the passing yards will be great. At quarterback, they couldn't be in much better shape with Garrett Nussmeier coming back. There's only two things that I would say are bad about him. He's a complete statue that can't run around at all, and he had a lot of turnovers last year. But as a pocket passer, I would say Nussmeier is probably the best in the country. I know in my top 10 Heisman candidates video, I put Carson Beck ahead of him, but that's really because Carson Beck, while he's a statue too, he's not quite as much of a statue as Garrett Nussmeier is, and he'll be playing an ACC schedule, which will be a lot easier than what Garrett Nussmeier will be playing against in the SEC. At wide receiver, they're really good here. Aaron Anderson comes back, and he had last year 61 catches for 884 yards and 5 touchdowns, averaging 14.5 a catch. And
look out! Aaron Anderson went down low to sprint. Anderson will not be caught. Touchdown 70.
They bring in Nick Anderson from Oklahoma, a very fast wide receiver and a very tall wide receiver at 6'4", a 4-star wide receiver. So he didn't play in 2024 because of an injury, but in 2023 as a freshman, he started 6 games and played in all 13 games and had 38 catches for 798 and 10 touchdowns, averaging a really impressive 21 yards per catch. And they bring in Barryon Brown from Kentucky, a wide receiver that didn't have as big of numbers last year as he did the 2 years before that because Kentucky's wide receiver situation was, quarterback situation was such a mess last year, but he still had in 11 games 29 catches for 361 and 3 touchdowns, averaging 12.4 a catch. But in 2023, he had 43 catches for 539 and four touchdowns. And in 2022, he had 50 catches for 628 and four touchdowns. And he averaged at 12.5 a catch in 2023 and 12.6 a catch in 2022. He's a good wide receiver. And Chris Hilton should play more this year. He didn't play much last year. He missed the first 7 games completely with an injury, and he only had one start last year. But he's a four-star wide receiver. That's one of the fastest players in the country. So he really did start to come on in the end of the season. In the last regular season game against Oklahoma, he had 2 catches for touchdowns of 85 yards total. And against Baylor in the bowl game, he had 4 catches for 113 and a touchdown. And Xavier Thomas is back, and he's a four-star wide receiver that's very speedy. Also, he played in every game, but only started 3 games. He didn't do much last year. Only 23 catches for 218 and 2 touchdowns. But in 2023, he played for Mississippi State and had a good season there in 11 games of 40 catches for 503 and a touchdown, averaging 12.6 a catch. They should be able to get more out of him this year. Now, at tight end, Mason Taylor leaving is a big loss. He was one of the best tight ends in the country the last couple of seasons. But they did bring in the tight end from Oklahoma, Bayard Sharp, who had in 12 games last year 42 catches for 324 and 2 touchdowns. But I think he'll have bigger numbers this year because Oklahoma's offense was horrible last year. And at running back, they've got Caden Durham coming back, who is a four-star running back. And as a freshman, he was one of the best freshmen at running backs in the country last year. He played in 12 games and started 6 games, and he had last season 753 yards on 140 carries and 6 touchdowns, averaging 5.4 a carry. But the problem is they don't really have any depth to help him out. And on the offensive line, they do lose 4 out of 5 starters, and including Will Campbell, who got drafted in the first round. So they will, I think, take a little bit of a step back here. But they did bring in 2 good transfers. They brought in a tackle from Northwestern, Josh Thompson, who had last year. He only allowed 8 total pressures and 0 sacks in 10 games last season that he played in. But he started 21 college games and played in 34 college games. And they bring in from Virginia Tech Braylon Moore, who is a 2-year starter for them. But last year in 12 games, he only allowed 3 sacks. And LSU does return their starting center, DJ Chester, who only allowed 3 sacks and 24 total quarterback pressures last season. And they do have 2 other offensive linemen coming back that have starting experience. So I do still think they'll be good on the offensive line. So defensively, LSU's defensive coordinator, I like his name is Blake Baker. He is in his second season at LSU. He came from Missouri and did a really good job with Missouri's defense. And LSU's defense improved more last year than I thought it would. But they gave up on average at 23.3 points per game. I think they'll give up much less than that this year. So on the defensive line, they do lose two players off to the NFL, Braden Swinson and Savion Jones. But overall, their defensive line is going to be better with all the transfers they brought in. So they bring in from Florida Jack Pyburn, who played in 12 games last year and had 60 tackles and a sack and an interception and a forced fumble. And they bring in from South Florida Bernard Gooden, who had last year 35 tackles and 1.5 sacks and 35 total quarterback pressures and two pass breakups. And they bring in from Florida State Patrick Payton, a 2-year starter for them. And he had in those 2 seasons combined 79 tackles and 11 sacks and 70 total quarterback pressures and 10 pass breakups and two forced fumbles. He was one of the best players on that 2023 Florida State defense that was really good. And they bring in from Nebraska Jamari Butler, a 2-year starter for them. In 22 games, those 2 years combined, he had 56 tackles and 8 sacks and 48 total quarterback pressures. I think this is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the country. And at linebacker, LSU doesn't just have two linebackers that are two of the best players at their position. They've got two linebackers that are two of the best players in college football, Harold Perkins and Whit Weeks. But they do lose Greg Penn, who was a great player for them at linebacker for the past 3 seasons. But Whit Weeks had a amazing season last year. He had 125 tackles, and he also had 3.5 sacks and 25 total quarterback pressures and three pass breakups and two forced fumbles and an interception. And Harold Perkins has been one of college football's best players since he was a freshman in 2022.
50.
He missed all but 4 games last year with an injury, but in the 2 years before that combined, he had 146 tackles and 13 sacks and 63 total quarterback pressures and eight pass breakups and six forced fumbles and two interceptions. And then in the secondary, I think they're going to be a lot better with all the transfers they brought in. But at cornerback, they've got Ashton Stamps coming back, who's really good. He had last year 51 tackles and 14 pass breakups and two quarterback pressures. And they bring in from Virginia Tech a good cornerback, Mansour Delane, who was a 2-year starter for them last year in 12 games. He had 54 tackles and seven pass breakups and four interceptions and two forced fumbles. And then at safety, they're going to be really good. They've got Jordan Gilbert coming back, who had last year 55 tackles and three pass breakups and an interception and a forced fumble. And then they bring in a really good safety from Houston, AJ Halsey, was a 2-year starter for them. And in those 2 years combined, he had 172 tackles and 12 pass breakups and 5 interceptions. And then they bring in a good safety from NC State, to Marcus Cooley, who had last year 39 tackles and 6 pass breakups, 3 interceptions, and 2 forced fumbles, and a sack, and 3 total quarterback pressures. But they do lose Major Burns at safety, who was a really good player for them. So now for the game by game predictions, starting with on the road at Clemson. So not only has LSU not won an opener with Brian Kelly, they've not won an opener since 2019 when they last won the national championship. And this opener doesn't do them any favors because Clemson is a team with a similar roster to LSU, and this game is going to be at night and on the road at Clemson at night. If you're not a much better team than they are, it's pretty much impossible to beat them. And Clemson, I think, is a little bit better of a coach to team than LSU is. I think this one will be close, but I've got to go with Clemson to get this win, and I feel pretty confident they will. But if you're an LSU fan watching, before you get mad and click off, watch till the end because I am very high on LSU. So now Louisiana Tech, this will be a big blowout win for LSU. They'll put their second string in at halftime, I would think. And now Florida, I think LSU is going to be very motivated for this one because it's a revenge game and it's at home. And I think it's a good matchup for LSU because if Florida's defense has a strength, it's their defensive line, and Florida's secondary, I think, is going to struggle again, and I don't think they'll be able to slow down LSU's passing attack. And the LSU is a passing team, and Florida may pressure Nussmeier some in this game, but I think LSU will be able to pressure Lagway some too. And LSU has linebackers that will help with that. That I don't think Florida will have. And even though Florida has a talented quarterback, I think they're going to lean more on the run than the pass this year. And I think LSU's front seven will slow that down. And it may be pretty close, but I think LSU gets the win. And then Southeastern Louisiana, this will be a name your score kind of game for LSU. The second string will be in at halftime. And now on the road at Ole Miss, this is kind of a toss-up game. So LSU's roster this year reminds me so much of the Ole Miss roster last year because they loaded up with good players on defense through the portal, and they have a loaded wide receiver room and an elite quarterback coming back, and they brought in a couple of good offensive linemen through the portal. But Lane Kiffin kind of wasted that team last year, and they will have a downgraded roster this year by quite a bit compared to last year's. But I did pick Ole Miss, if you watch the prediction video for them to have the same record as last year. But it'll depend on if Brian Kelly can get his players to play together well as a team. And if he does, I'm pretty confident that LSU will win this game. But if he doesn't, I think they probably lose this game with it being on the road. But I'm going to say LSU wins a close one. So now South Carolina. So South Carolina is a team that I now think is going to struggle this year. And South Carolina's secondary, I think, is going to be good, but it was good last year, and Nussmeier still threw for 285 on them. And I think South Carolina is going to have a hard time stopping the LSU passing attack again. And LSU struggled to stop the run with South Carolina last year, but I think that'll be better this year with an improved defensive line of LSU and a worse offensive line for South Carolina. And South Carolina's quarterback, Lenoris Sellers, with him being such a good athlete, I think he'll make this competitive. But I do think LSU will pull away in the fourth quarter and win this one by 10 to 14 points. So now Texas A&M. So overall, I do like Texas A&M's defense, but their secondary, I think, is going to struggle with this LSU passing attack. And Marcel Reed is not a quarterback that I think is going to be able to be shut down. But I do think LSU will be able to do much better stopping him than they were able to last year. And I think LSU will slow down A&M's run game, and I think they'll make enough plays passing to win a close one. Mm, and then Vanderbilt, I think they'll beat them too. Diego Pavie was a big upgrade for them at quarterback, but I know he can run around really well. But Nussmeier is a much better pocket passer than he is, and I don't think Vanderbilt can slow down LSU's passing attack, and I don't think they can handle LSU up front on either side. So now Alabama on the road. So if you watch my Alabama prediction video, you know I picked LSU to win this game, and I know it may seem like kind of a crazy pick, but you have to remember that Brian Kelly in his first season at LSU beat Nick Saban. And if he could beat Nick Saban, you have to admit that there's a chance he could beat Kalen DeBoer. And Nick Saban even lost, I think, twice when he was at Alabama at home to LSU. And the running back situation is pretty similar, but I think LSU's Caden Durham is a little bit better than Alabama's Jam Miller. And I think LSU can handle Alabama at the line of scrimmage on both sides. And Alabama also has one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, but they don't have near as good of a quarterback, I don't think, as LSU will. And LSU, I do think it will get slowed down in their passing attack because Alabama's secondary is going to be one of the best in the country. But I think LSU's defense will play a lot better than it has the last 2 years against Alabama. Uh, and I do think it'll be a close, low scoring game. So now Arkansas. Arkansas is a team that is going to lean very heavily on their quarterback, and that means that if they play a team that has a better quarterback than they do, which LSU does, Arkansas is not going to have much of a chance. Now, Taylon Green, being one of the best running quarterbacks in the country, will still, I'm sure, get Arkansas a few good runs, but I don't think Arkansas's running backs are going to be able to help them out much in this game. And I don't think Arkansas's secondary is going to be able to handle LSU's wide receivers. This could be pretty close, but I've got to go with LSU to get the win. And now Western Kentucky, this will be a big blowout win. LSU should get to play their second string by the start of the second half of this one. And now on the road at Oklahoma. So Oklahoma has the quarterback that can challenge this LSU secondary, and their defensive line is, I think, the deepest in the country. And Oklahoma, I think, will get some pressure on Nussmeier in this game. They're gonna have one of the best pass rushes in the country. And running, though, is not what LSU is going to want to do most of the time. They're going to want to throw the football. And Oklahoma's secondary, as good as it is, I think is still going to struggle to stop LSU's passing, attacking. John Mateer, him being a great running quarterback, I'm sure will get Oklahoma a few good runs in this game. But Oklahoma's offensive line, I don't really think could handle LSU. And Oklahoma's run game, I think, is going to struggle in this game. Now, the game being at Oklahoma will give them a decent chance to win this one. But when I do my predictions, I don't just go by the roster and who has home field advantage. I also take a look at the coaching. And Brian Kelly right now is a better coach than Brent Venables is. So I think that kind of makes up for it. So I'm going to go with LSU to get a close win over Oklahoma and finish the season at 11-1 overall and 8-0 in the conference. So this will get them to the SEC championship and to the college football playoff, whether they win or lose it. So that will be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.